Today we are going to disassemble this IP camera. This IP camera represents most of the IP cameras on the market today. This is a Dahua camera that is being sold under the label Amcrest. It is actually the same camera. So today we are going to disassemble this camera and see what's inside, how this camera works. So this is IP camera. First thing we're going to do is we're going to use the star key to remove the base. And here it is. So this is the cover. Usually to install this camera, you have to remove these pieces. So in case you need to install this camera, you have to pass this cable here first. Okay. If the camera is going to be, the cable is going to go up or down. So the cable is not going through here. You have to put the cable through the notch. You can keep this loose as this much, and then you fix the camera to the wall or the ceiling by 4 screws here that fix it to the application, which is like a wall, the ceiling. Now if the ceiling has a hole in the middle here, you don't have to go with the cable through the notch. You just go through like this, okay? And after you fix this or you attach this to the wall, this part here goes, and you just screw this in and you move it around. Okay, so this camera here, as most of the IP cameras have, it is 3 pieces, and those 3 pieces are the base, the housing, and the camera itself. So today we need to open this camera and see what's inside. So to look at the outside here, this is the infrared light. This is the motion detection and the sensor. This is a mic, the hole for the mic, and this is the lens. The camera has on the back of it 3 screws. They are Phillips screws. We will need a Phillips screwdriver to remove these screws, and some power into it. As we can see, the cable is coming here. There is a rubber ring that keeps the cable tight and keeps water from going inside the camera. So once we remove those 3 screws, we will be presented by the camera, the inside of the camera. Now this is a rubber gasket here that goes between the back of the camera and the front to keep it watertight. So here's where the screws go, and this is where the rubber gasket go. So we leave this here, and if we look inside, these are the 3 screws that go on the back of the camera, and then we will have these connectors. So the camera board seems to be loose. There is a screw here that we will just remove so we can expose the camera completely. And that will come loose, a small screw. And here the camera. Now Now this is the part here. This is the infrared light. So we will remove the screw to remove the part. And then here is the infrared light. That's how it looks like. Now the sensor here, this is the motion detection sensor or the light sensor, and this is the mic, and they are installed, they are kind of sealed with some type of black material here. What we can do here, we can follow these two to remove them from the board. And this is also this board here. We are going to remove that. We'll take a look at what's the component of this camera. This is a board that has, this is the SD card board. This works as a heat sink, by the way. This part here, it's possibly for keeping the camera cool. There's another screw here. These are other screws. Seems like there could be other screws. So this is the board. In order for this to work as a heatsink, this has to be attached to the board. So there can be some type of like adhesive. Here it is, adhesive. That goes here to cool the motherboard. This part here does some function to the camera. You can just remove that, pull this. And you gotta be careful when you do this, because sometimes you might actually pull the little wires. So you gotta just be gentle with it until you get it out. So this is the part of the camera. Now the second part is another attachment. This goes, so this here is the mic. Okay. And these have already come loose from this. This is what I was telling you about. This is for the lens, and the lens actually this was attached to this here, to this board here. So this should have been pulled. This was accidentally removed, so don't worry about it. And that's where it goes. So we'll kind of see how this whole camera is put together, so we can understand, if you want to understand more about security cameras and IP cameras and how they work. So you know the components. If you need to install a security camera, you need to have an idea about what's inside of it. Okay, so two glasses here for the lens and for that part. Now if we can look here, we see that this part here is also sealed. So all the cables are going to the back of the camera. Now this here is for the connection, power over Ethernet. And this will connect the camera to the POS switch or the back of the NVR, if the NVR has power over Ethernet capability. If it doesn't have, then you can use a 12 volt to plug it here, and then you can just use a regular. If you are going to use a regular switch, a gigabit switch or some type of switch that doesn't have power over Ethernet PoE capability, you can use a 12 volt. And this is all attached to the back of the motherboard of the camera by this switch here. sorry, by this clip. So we remove that, breaking it. So that's what comes with it. So we're gonna see what we dropped here. So these are the components that we can see. The infrared light. This camera is around $110. So it can be used for installation of security systems. This works the best with Dahua NVR, better than even like the. So if we see here, this is the back of the lens. Okay, you can see all the colors inside, and this is how the camera will pick the images. And these are the lens, and this here kind of like some type of gasket. And then we can see that there are it is screwed in, but there's some type of seal here. So try to, if you look through that, you'll see the light coming through. I'm thinking this is the RQ code for this part, possibly, or for the whole camera. Now to reset this camera, you have to come to the inside of the camera. Like there is not a reset button on this camera here from the outside. I believe you have to do the reset from inside the camera. I have done the reset before, so we just need to find that. Now this is where the SD card goes in case you want to record on board. Okay. This is the infrared light. This is the camera. Oh, here is the reset button right there. So sometimes when you forget the password for this camera, this part will be exposed just by opening it, the camera. You don't have to open the camera all the way, but this part here, you can just push on it for 15 seconds while the camera is powered on, and that will reset all the settings in the camera. So these are the components of the camera. We can see here that these are the these components get hot. Those chipsets here. We have some chipsets on this board. So this is the motherboard of that camera. This is where it will have the NIC, where it connects to the internet, and the IP address. It is actually like a little computer unit. So let me explain something. So these cameras, they work as a small computer, but they are one function or a few functions computer board. It has its own CPU. It has its own heat sink, which is that cools it down. Okay, this part here cools it down. So it takes the heat out of the chipset and the processor and puts it on this board here. And this board here, or this metal piece, will also take that heat and put it on the metal part of that camera. So that's how it cools down. So it is a specific function motherboard, or a computer board. So we have here the lens. Okay, the lens here, its function is to transport the light and the images from the lens here to goes into this part, and this is one function. So the first function is taking the image through these two wires to the board. Okay, now at this point, this is the only process, this is the only function and job of this lens here, is to take an image in, okay? So this part here does one function, takes the image in. Now, based on the light change, okay, the sensor itself will detect the light change from light to dark, and it will trigger another function, okay? And that function will start the infrared light. So this infrared light here will be triggered by the sensor giving a signal that it detects that there is no light anymore. So that's when this part comes alive, okay? So this is the two parts here. This will work based on the trigger of the motion and the sensor for the light sensor, and this will work based on whatever comes through. Now, sometimes if you also have motion detection, to record only and motion detection, the motion detection will also trigger another function, which is to activate the lens board here and the board, and it starts to record. Now, if the SD card is installed here, what happens is the SD card will be also detected by the board, and then based on programming the board itself, it can store from the lens directly to the SD card, or it can send the signal and the recording all through these wires here into the back, the cable here, to the MVR or the management, okay? Now this is another part here. This part here is pretty important, okay? And it has here certain components. I have not really studied all the components of these cameras, but I'm just opening it up to kind of see what's inside of it. And this goes here, okay? And this part here has some ICs here, and have this. This is, I think, this here is responsible for the power. This part here is responsible for the power, because when you see like a board that has like large components like this, it's kind of simple. It's pretty simple. So this is responsible for the power. So it feeds the power to the board, or does some type of regulation, okay? Again, I have not like looked in depth into the components and everything about this, because these things are not listed on the website, because those are like factory secrets. This camera, like I said, it's a Dahua camera. It's sold under the label Amcrest, but it is a Dahua camera. This is the exact type, because you have seen me before do some installing the firmware from Dahua on an Amcrest camera and turn it back into a Dahua camera. So that's what we did today. So this is the same camera that it can work on both software. Okay, so this is pretty much the camera itself. I was going to do some tests by powering on the camera and doing some stuff, but since this part here got damaged, this cable here, I will not be able to do that. Again, when you pull these out, make sure to pull them all as once. This can be fixed, but this camera is not a working camera. This camera has been damaged by some programming, and it caused the camera to malfunction. It can work like mechanically, like maybe the lens might be working, the heat, the infrared light can be working, this part can be working. It's just something on the motherboard itself, the ROM on this, the programming on it has been damaged, so it cannot do that. If we look here, and these all the components, they're not all from one manufacturer, because these components can be coming from different manufacturers. We can see the name here, Amarilla or something like that. I can't really see good. It's so small. But you can see the names on those components. These can be coming from different manufacturers and all installed at the same place. So this is basically what's inside an IP camera. Typical IP camera, this is exactly what is going to be inside. The motherboard, infrared light, the lens, the power supply or processor, the microphone, the motion detection sensor or the light sensor. It can do both functions, because I'm thinking, like, I'm not completely 100% sure, but this looks like, this is usually when we if you try to test, usually when I try to test if a camera, when it's working, if the camera, the infrared light is working or the camera is on, I usually plug this with my finger, and then if this light up, that means that this is you know, the camera has some power. This is some type of testing, but this could be doing both the motion detection and the light detection as well, because I do not see any other sensors next to this. Or it could be that the sensor itself, one of these items here has a sensor with it. Again, I'm not sure completely about this, but these are the components of a typical IP camera. Now we're just going to put everything back together.